show your mom your picture with Patricia?
Oh.
Does she really look like me?
She does.
And then my dad's, and then my boyfriend was like, you look like her. You really do look like her.
We are coming to you live from the National Results Operations Center, the ROC as we call it, right here in Tshwane, where all the focus is on the results that are coming in. We are almost there. We are now 2/3 into votes counted, and the picture is becoming clearer in terms of who will actually govern South Africa. As it's becoming clearer, it's also points of misery and excitement for some of the parties, and the excitement really is for the smaller parties, and misery is really for the big dominant parties, the ANC and the DA. If you remember, in 2016, it was the worst electoral defeat for the governing party as its party support declined, and this time around again, it is further declining, with some predicting that nationally there might even dip below 50%. The DA as well, 2016, they were very excited, they were growing. It was actually a big win for the DA in 2016, but right now the numbers are showing that they are actually declining. When I last looked at it, they were basically sitting at, they had about 22 councils confirmed, they were at 22%. The ANC itself was at 46.3%. They are being followed by the EFF, who were the new kids in town in 2016, but their numbers are also a bit shaky. They're making inroads in some parts of the country, but overall they're also declining. And then the IFP is one party that is celebrating because they are really growing, especially in their stronghold of KwaZulu-Natal. We're also going to be talking about Action SA, the new kids in town, in especially Gauteng, where in Johannesburg, the prized metro of Johannesburg, they are the clear kingmaker, even pushing down the EFF to number 4 in terms of how much votes they had actually gathered. I am joined by Eyewitness News' senior political reporter, Teto Matlakwana. And Teto, you know, overall, I think that we expected this to be a tough election.
Absolutely.
I think that there were a lot of expectations that the ANC will see a further decline, but I think the surprise also was with the DA.
Absolutely.
That they would not manage to even improve on the 2016 electoral support.
Absolutely, Mahlatse, and it's very interesting just where you see that loss of votes, especially for the DA. You'd expect that the kind of performance that they would have had in regions, for example, in Gauteng, where the Midvaal particularly was an exemplary municipality, where of course the outgoing mayor, the former mayor,
Bongani Baloyi, yeah,
had proven that actually they can get things right, as their slogan says. But even with that sort of win and the confidence that the voters in this round of elections have shown in the Midvaal run municipality by, of course, adding a good 10% of votes on the DA's ticket, elsewhere people are saying, no, actually we reject you. And that takes us back to the personality politics as opposed to the national politics. That the voters say, we see you, but we do not see you. We see your representative. And because your message is varied everywhere in the country, where you find national leaders, of course, igniting racial tensions and all manner of other controversy, people still say that, but we know who we trust. And we may trust someone who comes to us with your ticket, but we still reject you. And that's what we are seeing with the vote in Tshwane, where, of course, the DA, given the kind of, I guess, force that they've had in government, you'd think that there'd be resonance across the board with the electorate in Tshwane. Yet you don't see that because their numbers are actually not going as high as one would have seen for a sitting government.
I was actually thinking in Tshwane, if you look at the disaster that was the coalition,
Yes.
the residents of Tshwane wouldn't have been happy with it. I think at the end they had about 4 mayors
Yes.
in that city, and a very prized city where they had an opportunity to showcase governing beyond Midval if we are talking Gauteng in particular.
Absolutely. And I mean, just looking at the numbers now, so they were at 31% of the vote in at last count. They were sitting at 34%. Now, if you look at that 43 from the past election for the DA, that's a big shift.
This is for Tshwane, right?
This is for Tshwane,
Yeah.
absolutely. And even if the vote has not come in such a large number, and we expect to see some sort of a shift after lunch where maybe it may tip towards the 50% mark, that is telling, especially where they're losing this particular support. And the ANC, of course, is not doing any better either in this particular city, because there was always this assumption that given the failures of the DA-led coalition governments, which initially started with the EFF in partnership, that somehow people would turn back to the ANC and say, but we had it better, you know, when, for example, Hossein Suramkhupa was the mayor at last ANC governance. Yet people are saying, no, the ANC was at 31 when I last looked. And of course, that is from a good number in 2016. And also the EFF, not really doing as great, but just climbing a little bit. They're at 12%. At last count now they're at 10.6%. In 2016, they were at 12. And sort of wonder if then the association to that government that collapsed and actually led, it's coming back to bite.
People are punishing them.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, it was that coalition with the DA where they refused to even sign up in terms of putting forward their own demands, and then they decided in the middle of it, we are going to pull out. And that is where we saw the disaster of trying to govern that city.
And even then, the rationale of the EFF was that you either give us the Johannesburg mayorship or we do not support you in Tshwane. Voters are saying, you're all about yourselves. You're all about positions. Because had you sought our interests to come first, you would have somehow thought, but what happens when a budget is not passed in a municipality? Services come to your house.
Yeah.
You look at Tshwane, you drive around Tshwane, the evidence is all around. So then the question that the voters told us they were asking themselves on election day, when we're out in these townships and the suburbs of Tshwane, was, but we have seen them to look after their own interests. And it's showing.
And it's definitely showing. Let's now focus on the city of Joburg, right? I mean, this is the prized metro. It is the richest on the continent. Everything rests on it. I'm just going to look now in the numbers that we had put down. So at last count, we had, or at least the latest that we have, the ANC is at 31.6%. 31.65, the DA 29.11, EFF 10.49%, and then Action SA is at 16.08, passing the EFF, which were the toast of the 2016 elections.
Yes.
What happens there? I mean, this is where you start thinking around coalition governance. Both the ANC and the DA have failed and are going to fail to get a governing majority, and they will need help.
Yes.
We don't know how far or how much help they will need, but they will definitely need help. Coalition governments for Johannesburg.
Yeah.
We now have this conversation around Action SA,
Yes.
and we saw Herman Mashaba very excited.
Boastfully walking about. Yes.
Boastfully saying, you know, I am in. I mean, do we think Action SA, where did they take votes from? Is it votes from all three, ANC, DA, EFF, or because it doesn't feel like they went and found new
votes,
voters?
yes. And that's exactly the thing about the South African voter demographic that we know, as in our conversation yesterday, and I'm quite sure that the viewers were following that too, that the idea that voter turnout is that low, and given the fact that eligible voters are not registered, there's no new votes. The basket has literally those people who have traditionally gone to the polls, and those who, of course, have decided to get off the track have also just eaten away at that vote. Now it can only come from the three main parties, being the ANC, the DA, and the EFF. And in the final outcome, we will see where that vote came from much more clearer, because I doubt that any of them are going to grow any more substantially than the numbers we are seeing now. And that, of course, puts the Action SA in a very, very comfortable position. But the problem comes back again, personality politics. Mashaba says, but I can only talk to you if, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, he says to the ANC, actually, I don't even want to talk to you. Do not call me, you know, and I will not even be calling you.
Let's actually listen to him and Mashaba. We spoke to him a little bit earlier when he was telling the ANC, don't bother calling me.
Firstly, we are not interested in getting into a coalition with the ANC. We are happy with the others, but we will engage. The reason why I cannot really go into a coalition with the ANC, I personally don't regard the ANC as a political party. I take them honestly as a criminal enterprise, and honestly, I have my integrity to really protect, and not just mine. I have the integrity to protect of all the millions of South Africans who are behind Action SA.
That was the president of Action SA, Herman Mashaba, there, basically saying that he will not consider working with the ANC. We also spoke to Jesse Duarte, who said whatever to Herman.
He has already said that he would never work with the ANC. So we would not want to work with someone who already overtly expresses himself in that way. Besides, I think from a principle point of view, somebody who goes to the electorate, gets 17% of the vote, goes on television and says, if I'm not the mayor, I will not be a councillor. That gives me a bad vibe. I don't feel good about that. And I don't think we would want to associate with that kind of an individual. So we will talk on Friday. We haven't negotiated with anybody. We will look at our experience over the last 5 years, where we've had coalitions, what's worked, what's not worked.
That was the ANC's Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte responding there to Action SA President Herman Mashaba, who said, I will not go into a coalition government with the ANC. And the ANC also saying we accept that rejection. As much as they are clear about the ANC, we know that there are those within the DA who are still healing from the wounds of how they were treated within the Democratic Alliance, and they're not as excited about the possibility of having to work with the Democratic Alliance.
Absolutely. And Mahlatsi, there's something that Hammond said yesterday. He said that his pursuit is to improve the lives of the poor. That if the DA comes on board and it says, we commit to supporting you in this quest, then there could be a conversation. He alluded to that much. And that, of course, is going to be uncomfortable, as you rightfully say, for those people who left the DA in protest. Because if you're saying that this party does not prioritize the needs and the services for black people and poor people in Johannesburg, and you turn around and you say, but I can't talk to you based on this and that condition, that sounds a bit hypocritical. And that is not a great feature in politics, and that can rent the party in the middle, in divisions. And we have not seen that kind of implosion because it's a new party. In a new party, everyone is still singing Kumbaya, holding each other's hand, and actually agreeing on how they are going to work at attaining power. And once you get a slice of it and you start turning back on issues that you stood vehemently on, saying that you will not compromise on, that may have issues around the confidence that his own supporters have in him and those in his own leadership have in him.
Maybe what they're calculating is that my enemy's enemy is my friend.
And we all know what the consequence of that is. Look at Twan.
We also know that in politics there are no permanent enemies.
None
but it will be interesting to see. I mean, my thoughts were the leader of the former DA leader in Gauteng, John Moody, and how public his resignation was and how he condemned the DA. We understand he's going to be part of those negotiations if they are approached by the DA for a coalition. So it will make for something interesting to watch. Before we wrap up, let's circle back to Gauteng and the ANC.
Yes.
When we're looking at the numbers, it's quite scary what's happening to the ANC because it looks like they'll only emerge with Lesedi municipality, which includes Heidelberg.
Yes.
They will have Mirafong. They will barely, maybe hold on to Mogale City. And it just, one gets us, and they will lose, definitely it looks like they will lose governing majority in Mfuleni.
Yeah.
What does that signal for them, given that in 2019, the provincial vote, they barely won it?
Absolutely. And, just starting off with Mogale City, where you see a growth in the EFF by 2%, right? That is something. It's 2% is a big number in these elections, given just how everybody's scraping for every little percent point. And the DA declines, of course, from 35 to 30 Mahlats. There is a whole 5%, you know?
Yeah.
And the ANC from 49 to 41, 4. Those are telling numbers. People have decided that actually we might just decide that we are not going to vote, or the little vote that we wanted to cast either in support of the ANC, we're going to give to the EFF. And that's what you see there. And Mogale City, as you know, is not a big municipality.
No, it's not.
It's actually quite small. And the level of turnout there was also quite low. And those people who did go out to vote decided that actually we have tried you, ANC, and we do not feel that you are worthy of our vote. Now, when you look at Mfuleni, of course, it's very interesting given the Midval, you know, or opposite, I guess, opposite.
Right next door,
Yeah,
neighbors.
right next door.
Yeah.
And you have this Midval, which is a glistening, shiny child, you know, of the DEA. Then you have next door where they literally live with waste and step out of their homes and they see nothing but sewage. And people have lived with that problem for years. We've even had the South African National Defence Force step in to try and solve that problem with no solution to it. And the people there decided no more. But here's the interesting thing. The DA is making inroads there. So the people of that municipality have decided, maybe let's try what the Midval tried.
Yeah.
And even if it may be just under 10% of that shift, it's still a shift. And that shift is eating away at the ANC vote. Again, reminding them that people voice their frustrations and not in vain.
And we wonder if there will be some accountability, especially from ANC leaders. I mean, I always say with Mfuleni, the Gauteng Premier, David Makura, did place it under administration, but we haven't seen that pay off in any way. I mean, the stories of the sewage just running down the streets and just the lack of basic services have dominated the coverage here. Unfortunately, Teto, we have ran out of time. We will continue with the latest updates right here on Eyewitness News later on in the afternoon. And there are a few issues we will be looking at. For example, the Human Size Research Council report that came out that basically said South Africans are happy with the Independent Electoral Commission. There are issues, but overall they are happy and they think these elections were free and fair. Of course, coming at the back of those complaints, especially from political parties, around people who didn't find themselves on the voters' roll, people who arrived and were told, no, you're actually registered at a different place, and the voter management devices that in some places didn't work and delayed voting. So we will have a lot more on that later in the afternoon. That's it from us here for now. My name is Mahlatsi Mahlasi.